Maya lived in a small, quiet town surrounded by fields of golden wheat that swayed gently with the breeze. Her life was simple but filled with warmth. At least it seemed that way on the surface. She was just 14 years old, still figuring out who she was and what the world meant to her. At home, her parents were strict but loving in their own way. They had rules for everything: when to come home after school, how long she could talk on the phone with friends, even what clothes she wore. Maya didn't mind too much because deep down she knew they cared about her. But little did anyone know, beneath this seemingly ordinary life, a storm was brewing. At school, Maya tried her best to fit in. She wasn't one of the popular kids, nor did she stand out much, but she had a close circle of friends who made her laugh during lunch breaks and shared secrets under the shade of the big oak tree near the playground. Life felt safe and predictable until something happened that changed everything forever. It started innocently enough. A boy named Ryan, 2 years older than her, began paying attention to her. He would smile at her in the hallway, compliment her hair, or ask if he could sit next to her during study hall. To Maya, these gestures felt special. No one had ever shown her so much interest before, and slowly, she started to trust him. Ryan seemed charming and kind, always knowing exactly what to say to make her feel important. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky orange and pink, Ryan invited Maya to hang out behind the football field where no one else went. For Maya, this felt like an adventure, a chance to escape the monotony of her days. What happened next was something she never saw coming. Before she realized it, Ryan pressured her into doing things she didn't fully understand. Too young to grasp the consequences, too scared to say no, Maya found herself trapped in a situation far beyond her control. Weeks passed, and Maya noticed changes in her body. She felt nauseous in the mornings, craved strange foods, and missed her period. Panic set in as she pieced together what might be happening. Late one night, unable to sleep, she mustered the courage to confide in her mother. Trembling, she walked into the kitchen where her mom was washing dishes and blurted out the truth. "Mom, I think I'm pregnant." The words hung heavy in the air, like thunderclouds ready to burst. Her mother froze, the dish towel slipping from her hands. For a moment there was silence, just the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Then came the questions, sharp and unrelenting. How could this happen? Who did this to you? Maya stammered through tears, explaining about Ryan, though leaving out the details that made her cheeks burn with shame. When her father overheard the conversation, his reaction was explosive. His face turned red, veins bulging in his neck as he shouted accusations. "You've brought disgrace upon this family," he roared, slamming his fist on the table. The argument escalated quickly. Maya's parents paced the room, their voices overlapping in anger and disbelief. Her mother sobbed, torn between wanting to comfort her daughter and being overwhelmed by the weight of the news. Her father, however, refused to listen to reason. In his eyes, Maya's pregnancy was not just a mistake. It was a betrayal of everything they had taught her. "We can't have this shame hanging over us," he declared finally, his tone cold and final. "If you want to keep that baby, then you can leave this house." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. Leave? Where would she go? She was only 14, still a child herself. Desperate, she pleaded with them, promising to figure things out, to take responsibility. But her father wouldn't budge. "It's your choice," he said sternly. "Stay here and give up the baby, or leave and raise it yourself. Either way, you're not staying under my roof like this." That night, Maya packed a small bag, stuffing it with whatever clothes she could grab and a few mementos that reminded her of happier times. As she zipped up the bag, tears streamed down her face. She wanted to scream, to beg them to change their minds, but she knew it was pointless. Her parents' decision was firm, unwavering. Before dawn broke, she slipped out of the house quietly, clutching the strap of her bag tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Standing alone on the porch, Maya looked back at the house one last time. Memories flooded her mind. The laughter around the dinner table, the bedtime stories her mother used to read, the bike rides with her dad on summer evenings. Now, all of that felt like a distant dream. Taking a deep breath, she stepped off the porch and onto the empty street. The cool morning air hit her face, and for the first time in her life, Maya truly understood what it meant to be afraid, not just of the unknown, but of the harsh reality that awaited her. As she walked away, the weight of her situation pressed heavily on her shoulders. She was a child, carrying another child, completely unprepared for the challenges ahead. Yet somewhere deep inside, a flicker of determination ignited. If no one else believed in her, she would have to believe in herself. Little did she know this painful chapter was just the beginning of a journey that would test her strength, resilience, and capacity to forgive. The streets were cold and unforgiving, a stark contrast to the warmth Maya had once known at home. At just 14 years old, she was thrust into a world that showed no mercy to someone so young and vulnerable. Her first few nights were spent wandering aimlessly, unsure of where to go or whom to trust. The weight of her small bag felt heavier with each step, not because of its contents, but because it symbolized everything she had lost: her family, her innocence, and the life she thought she'd always have. Hunger quickly became her constant companion. Maya hadn't realized how much she relied on simple comforts like meals prepared by her mother or snacks tucked into her school lunchbox. Now, every bite of food had to be earned or begged for. She passed by bakeries and restaurants, staring longingly at the displays of fresh bread and steaming soups, knowing she couldn't afford even the smallest treat. Sometimes, she rummaged through trash bins behind grocery stores, searching for discarded items still wrapped in plastic. It was humiliating, but survival didn't leave room for pride. Sleeping outdoors was another challenge Maya hadn't anticipated. The ground was hard and uneven, and the chill of the night seeped through her thin clothes. She sought refuge wherever she could find it: an abandoned building, a park bench partially hidden by bushes, or the corner of an alleyway shielded from the wind. But none of these places offered real safety. Every sound, the distant bark of a dog, the screech of tires, the shuffle of footsteps, made her heart race. Fear kept her awake most nights, her eyes darting toward shadows that seemed alive with danger. Despite the hardships, Maya refused to let despair consume her entirely. Her growing belly reminded her daily of the life inside her, a baby who depended on her completely. This thought gave her strength when she felt like giving up. She began talking softly to her unborn child as she walked, imagining what kind of person he or she might grow up to be. "We're going to make it," she whispered one evening, her voice trembling but determined. "I promise." One day, while sitting on a bench near the bus station, Maya noticed a flyer taped to a lamppost. It advertised a shelter for women in need, run by a local community organization. Though hesitant, she decided to follow the address listed on the paper. The walk took longer than expected, and by the time she arrived, exhaustion had settled deep into her bones. The building wasn't grand, a modest brick structure with peeling paint, but something about it felt welcoming. Inside, a woman named Rosa greeted her with a warm smile. Rosa was in her late 50s, with silver streaks in her dark hair and laugh lines etched around her eyes. She listened patiently as Maya explained her situation, nodding occasionally without interrupting. When Maya finished speaking, tears streaming down her face, Rosa placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're safe here," she said firmly. "No one will hurt you." Rosa introduced Maya to the other residents of the shelter, women of all ages, each carrying their own burdens. Some were fleeing abusive relationships. Others, like Maya, had nowhere else to turn. Despite their differences, they shared a bond forged by hardship and resilience. For the first time in weeks, Maya didn't feel entirely alone. Life at the shelter wasn't easy, but it provided stability Maya desperately needed. In exchange for a bed and meals, she helped with chores, cleaning bathrooms, folding laundry, and preparing food in the communal kitchen. These tasks kept her busy and gave her a sense of purpose. Slowly, she began to regain some confidence. The kindness of the staff and fellow residents taught her that people could still care, even in a world that often felt cruel. As her pregnancy progressed, Maya faced new challenges. Simple activities like walking or bending over became increasingly difficult, yet she remained determined to stay active, volunteering extra hours at the shelter whenever possible. One day, Rosa approached her with an idea. "There's a diner down the street looking for part-time help," she said. "It's not glamorous work, but it pays. Think you can handle it?" Maya hesitated. She'd never held a job before, let alone worked while pregnant. But the thought of earning her own money excited her. With Rosa's encouragement, she applied and was hired almost immediately. The owner, a gruff but fair man named Mr. Jenkins, took pity on her situation and allowed her flexible hours. At first, balancing work and rest was tough, but Maya adapted quickly. She learned how to take orders, serve customers, and clean tables efficiently. The tips she earned, though modest, went straight into a jar labeled Baby Fund. While working at the diner also introduced Maya to a wider circle of people. Regular patrons started recognizing her friendly demeanor and genuine smile. They tipped generously and occasionally slipped her advice or words of encouragement. One elderly customer, Mrs. Thompson, struck up conversations with Maya during slow shifts. Over cups of coffee, she shared stories of overcoming adversity in her own life. "You're stronger than you think," Mrs. Thompson told her one afternoon. "This baby is lucky to have you." Months passed and Maya's due date drew closer. The shelter arranged for her to attend prenatal checkups, ensuring both she and the baby remained healthy. During these appointments, Maya marveled at the tiny heartbeat echoing through the ultrasound machine. Each visit reinforced her resolve to provide the best life possible for her child. She dreamed of raising him or her in a home filled with love and laughter, far removed from the pain she'd endured. When the day finally came, Maya gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. Holding him for the first time, she felt an overwhelming surge of emotions: love, relief, and gratitude. She named him Elijah, meaning, "God is my strength." As she gazed at his peaceful face, Maya knew she'd made the right decision to fight for their future together. Though the road ahead would undoubtedly be difficult, Maya had already proven herself capable of enduring unimaginable hardships. With Elijah in her arms, she vowed to keep pushing forward, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. Life may have knocked her down, but it hadn't broken her spirit. And as she looked at her son, she realized something profound. They were survivors, bound by love and destined to rise above their circumstances. Life with Elijah was a whirlwind of emotions, challenges, and tiny victories. Maya quickly learned that being a mother wasn't just about feeding, changing diapers, or rocking her baby to sleep. It was about creating a world where he could thrive, even if their reality was far from perfect. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, her body still aching from the physical toll of pregnancy and childbirth. She'd tiptoe around the small shared room at the shelter so as not to disturb the other women, carefully preparing Elijah's bottle while whispering prayers for strength. Maya knew she couldn't rely on others forever. While the shelter had given her a lifeline, it wasn't meant to be a permanent solution. Determined to build a stable life for herself and Elijah, she began setting goals, small ones at first, then bigger ones as her confidence grew. The first step was securing a more permanent place to live. With the money she'd saved from working at the diner, along with some assistance from Rosa, she managed to rent a modest studio apartment in a quiet part of town. It wasn't much, a single room with a mini fridge, a fold-out couch, and a crib borrowed from the shelter. But to Maya, it felt like a palace. For the first time in years, she had a space she could call her own, a safe haven where Elijah could grow. Working full-time at the diner became Maya's anchor. Mr. Jenkins, impressed by her work ethic, promoted her to a shift supervisor role within months. This came with slightly better pay and more responsibility, which Maya embraced wholeheartedly. She learned how to manage schedules, train new employees, and handle difficult customers with grace. Her coworkers admired her determination, often joking that she ran the place better than Mr. Jenkins himself. But behind her cheerful demeanor, Maya carried the weight of knowing she was doing all this for Elijah. Late nights spent counting tips and planning budgets reminded her of how fragile their situation still was. Despite the long hours at work, Maya made sure to dedicate every spare moment to Elijah. She sang him lullabies, read him picture books donated by the shelter, and took him on walks through the park. Watching his face light up when he discovered something new, a bird chirping, leaves rustling in the wind, filled her with a sense of purpose she'd never felt before. Raising Elijah wasn't easy, but it gave meaning to every sacrifice she made. He was her reason to keep going no matter how hard things got. One day, while flipping through a magazine during a rare break at the diner, Maya stumbled upon an article about earning a GED General Educational Development Certificate. The idea struck a chord deep within her. She realized that if she wanted to give Elijah opportunities she never had, she needed to set an example. Education was the key to unlocking doors that had been closed to her for so long. That evening, after tucking Elijah into bed, she sat down at the tiny table in her apartment and began researching programs in her area. Balancing work, parenting, and studying proved to be one of the toughest challenges Maya had ever faced. Mornings started earlier than ever, with Elijah strapped to her chest in a carrier while she studied flashcards during his nap times. Nights were spent hunched over textbooks, memorizing math formulas and practicing essay writing. There were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, when the thought of giving up seemed tempting, but each time doubt crept in, she looked at Elijah sleeping peacefully beside her and reminded herself why she was doing this. "We're going to rise above," she whispered to him one night, tracing the outline of his little hand with her finger. "Both of us." Her hard work paid off when she passed her GED exams with flying colors. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. For the first time in her life, Maya allowed herself to feel proud, not just of what she'd achieved, but of the journey that had brought her here. Her professors at the community college noticed her tenacity and encouraged her to apply for scholarships to pursue higher education. At first, the idea seemed impossible. How could someone like her, a teenage mother who had once been homeless, dream of attending college? But her mentors believed in her, and slowly, Maya began to believe in herself too. With the help of financial aid and a local scholarship program for single parents, Maya enrolled in night classes at the community college. She chose social work as her major, inspired by the kindness Rosa and others had shown her during her darkest days. Maya wanted to pay it forward, to help people navigate the same struggles she had faced. Studying late into the night while Elijah slept became her new routine. She juggled coursework, exams, and projects alongside her job at the diner, often surviving on caffeine and sheer determination. Elijah grew into a curious and affectionate toddler, lighting up Maya's life in ways she hadn't imagined possible. He loved sitting on her lap while she typed essays on her laptop, babbling happily as if cheering her on. On weekends, they explored the library together, checking out books about animals, planets, and adventures. Maya cherished these moments knowing they were building memories that would last a lifetime. Despite the challenges, she found joy in the simplest things: a giggle from Elijah, a hug that lasted a little longer than usual, or the satisfaction of crossing another item off her to-do list. As the years went by, Maya's dedication began to bear fruit. She graduated from community college with honors, earning an associate degree in social work. Her professors urged her to transfer to a 4-year university to complete her bachelor's degree. And though the prospect was daunting, Maya knew she couldn't stop now. With Elijah now a bright and energetic 5-year-old, she moved them into a slightly larger apartment closer to campus. Juggling school, work, and parenting remained exhausting, but Maya refused to let anything stand in her way. By the time Elijah turned 10, Maya had earned her bachelor's degree and landed a job as a counselor at a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping young mothers. It was fulfilling work, allowing her to connect with women who understood her pain and resilience. Seeing the impact she made in their lives filled her with pride and gratitude. She often brought Elijah to events hosted by the organization, introducing him to the women she worked with. "This is my mom," he'd say proudly, holding her hand tightly. Maya beamed every time, knowing she was showing him the value of perseverance and compassion. Though her achievements were remarkable, Maya never forgot where she came from. The scars of her past, the betrayal by her family, the loneliness of those early days on the streets, remained etched in her heart. Yet instead of letting bitterness consume her, she used her experiences as fuel to drive her forward. She often told Elijah stories about their journey, not to dwell on the hardships but to remind him that no obstacle was insurmountable if you kept pushing. Life was far from perfect, but Maya had built something beautiful from the ashes of her past. She had a career she was passionate about, a son who adored her, and a future brimming with possibilities. Still, there was one chapter left unresolved, the relationship with her family. As much as she tried to focus on the present, memories of her childhood home lingered in the corners of her mind. She wondered if they ever thought about her, if they regretted turning their backs on her all those years ago. These questions haunted her quietly, waiting for the right moment to surface. For now, Maya chose to focus on the life she had created, a life defined not by loss or rejection, but by love, strength, and the unwavering belief that tomorrow could always be better than today. Years had passed since Maya last thought about her hometown, let alone the family who had cast her out. Life had moved forward in ways she once couldn't have imagined. Elijah was now a bright and confident teenager, excelling in school and making friends easily. Maya herself had carved out a fulfilling career as a counselor, helping young mothers navigate the same struggles she'd faced. Her days were filled with purpose, and her nights were peaceful, spent reading or talking to Elijah about his dreams for the future. Yet, despite all she'd accomplished, there was a part of her heart that still carried unanswered questions. It started innocently enough, a lazy Saturday afternoon when Maya decided to scroll through social media while sipping coffee on her balcony. She didn't use social media often. It felt like opening a door to a world she'd left behind. But something compelled her to log in that day. As she scrolled past photos of acquaintances and distant memories, one post caught her eye. It was from her hometown's annual Harvest Festival, an event she remembered fondly from her childhood. The photo showed rows of colorful stalls, laughter-filled faces, and families gathered under twinkling string lights. What truly stopped her breath, though, was seeing familiar faces among the crowd. Her younger siblings, now grown, smiling brightly alongside her aging parents. Maya stared at the image for a long time, her fingers hovering over the screen. She hadn't seen them in over a decade, not since the day she walked away from her childhood home with nothing but a small bag and a broken heart. Seeing their faces stirred emotions she'd buried deep inside. Sadness, anger, longing, and even a flicker of hope. Memories flooded back. The smell of her mother's cooking, the sound of her father's voice calling her name, the warmth of sitting beside her siblings during family movie nights. These moments, once so vivid, had faded into the background of her life, overshadowed by the pain of rejection. But why now? Why did this post hit her so hard? Maybe it was because Elijah was growing up, reminding her of the importance of family. Or maybe it was because she'd finally reached a point in her life where she no longer felt defined by the mistakes of her past. Whatever the reason, Maya realized she couldn't ignore these feelings any longer. For years, she'd convinced herself that moving on meant forgetting, but now she understood that healing required facing the truth. That evening, after Elijah went to bed, Maya sat alone in her living room, staring at the photo again. She replayed the events of that fateful night in her mind, the shouting, the accusations, the ultimatum. Her father's words echoed in her head. "If you want to keep that baby, then you can leave this house." At the time, those words had shattered her, but now looking back she saw them differently. They weren't just cruel, they were born out of fear, shame, and pride. Did they ever regret what they'd done? Did they wonder where she was, how she was doing? The idea of returning to her hometown terrified her. What if they rejected her? Again? What if nothing had changed? But another thought nagged at her. What if they had changed? What if they wanted to make amends? Maya knew she couldn't go back seeking answers without first deciding what she wanted. Was this about revenge, closure, forgiveness? After hours of reflection, she came to a realization. It wasn't about them. This was about her. She needed to face her past, not to settle old scores, but to reclaim the pieces of herself she'd left behind. The next morning, Maya told Elijah about her plan. He listened quietly, his brow furrowed in thought. When she finished speaking, he looked up at her with wide eyes. "Do you think they'll be happy to see you?" he asked softly. Maya hesitated before answering. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I need to find out. Not for them, for me." With Elijah's encouragement, Maya began preparing for the trip. She booked a bus ticket to her hometown, packed a suitcase with care, and practiced what she would say if she encountered her family. Each step felt monumental, as if she were walking toward a cliff she might fall off. Yet beneath the fear, there was a quiet determination. She wasn't the same scared 14-year-old girl anymore. She was a strong, capable woman who had built a life against all odds. If anyone could handle this, it was her. When the day of the trip arrived, Maya woke up early, too nervous to eat breakfast. Elijah hugged her tightly before she left, whispering, "You've got this, Mom." Those 3 words gave her strength as she boarded the bus. The ride was long, giving her plenty of time to think. She watched the landscape shift from bustling city streets to rolling countryside, each mile bringing her closer to the place she used to call home. As the bus pulled into the station, Maya's heart raced. She stepped off cautiously, taking in the familiar sights and smells of her hometown. Everything looked smaller than she remembered. The buildings, the streets, even the people. Yet, somehow, it still felt overwhelming. Walking through town, she noticed subtle changes. New shops, fresh coats of paint on old houses, and unfamiliar faces passing by. Despite the updates, the essence of the place remained the same, a quiet charm that tugged at her heartstrings. Her first stop was the cafe where she used to work as a teenager. It was a risk going there. What if someone recognized her? But something drew her to it, perhaps nostalgia or the hope of finding closure. Pushing open the door, she stepped inside. The bell above the entrance jingled softly, and for a moment, everything seemed frozen. Then heads turned. Whispers rippled through the room as patrons exchanged knowing glances. Words spread quickly. "It's Maya, she's back." Maya stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. A waitress approached her hesitantly, recognition dawning on her face. "Is that really you?" the woman asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Maya nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, it's me," she replied softly. Within minutes, the cafe buzzed with excitement. People who barely acknowledged her existence before now greeted her warmly, asking questions about her life and marveling at how much she'd grown. Some expressed guilt for not reaching out when she disappeared, while others simply marveled at her resilience. After catching up with a few old acquaintances, Maya knew it was time to face the hardest part of her journey. Visiting her childhood, home. Standing outside the familiar front door, she took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her hands trembled as she knocked gently. For a moment there was silence. Then the door creaked open, revealing her mother. Time seemed to stop as they stared at each other, neither speaking. Finally, her mother gasped, tears welling up in her eyes. "Maya," she whispered, her voice breaking. Before Maya could respond, her father appeared behind her mother, his expression a mix of shock and confusion. The sight of him sent a wave of conflicting emotions rushing through her. Anger, hurt, longing, all of it bubbled to the surface. But instead of letting those feelings consume her, Maya took a step forward. "Hi," she said simply, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. For the first time in years, Maya allowed herself to confront the people who had shaped and scarred her past. This wasn't about blame or apologies. It was about understanding. And as she crossed the threshold of her childhood home, she knew she was ready to face whatever came next. The air inside the house felt heavy, thick with memories and unspoken words. Maya stood in the doorway, her heart pounding as she took in the familiar sights, the worn rug in the hallway, the faded wallpaper peeling at the corners, and the faint scent of her mother's lavender soap lingering in the air. Everything looked the same, yet everything felt different. Her parents stared at her, their faces a mix of shock, guilt, and something else she couldn't quite place, perhaps regret. Her mother was the first to break the silence. Stepping forward, she reached out tentatively, as if afraid Maya might disappear if she touched her. "Is it really you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Maya nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that would bridge the gap between them, but the words stuck in her chest. Instead, she simply said, "Yes, Mom. It's me." Her father remained rooted to the spot, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His expression was unreadable, a mask of conflicting emotions. For years, Maya had imagined this moment, what she would say, how he would react. But now that it was happening, she felt unprepared. The anger she'd carried for so long wasn't gone, but it no longer burned as fiercely. In its place was a quiet ache, a longing to understand why things had turned out the way they did. "Come in," her mother urged softly, stepping aside to let Maya enter. Hesitant at first, Maya stepped into the living room, her eyes scanning the space. The furniture was arranged exactly as she remembered it, down to the crocheted blanket draped over the armrest of the couch. Yet, the warmth she once associated with this room was missing. It felt like a museum exhibit, a preserved version of her childhood, frozen in time but devoid of life. Her mother gestured for her to sit, perching nervously on the edge of a chair across from her. Her father finally moved, sinking heavily onto the couch beside her. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unanswered questions hanging between them. Finally, her mother spoke. We didn't think we'd ever see you again," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "After you left, we tried to find you, to call, to write, but we never knew where you went." Maya blinked, caught off guard by the confession. "You looked for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Of course we did," she said. "We made a terrible mistake, Maya. Your father and we were scared. We didn't know how to handle what happened. We thought we were doing the right thing, but looking back..." Her voice trailed off, choked with emotion. Maya's gaze shifted to her father, who still hadn't spoken. His jaw was clenched, his hands gripping the edge of the couch as though holding on for dear life. She could see the toll the years had taken on him. His hair was almost entirely gray, and deep lines etched his face. He looked older than she, remembered, more fragile. Part of her wanted to hate him, to hold on to the bitterness that had fueled her for so long. But another part of her saw the pain in his eyes, the same pain she'd carried for years. "I'm not here to argue or rehash the past," Maya said finally, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "I came because I needed answers, not excuses, but an understanding of why you did what you did." She paused, glancing at both of them before continuing. "What hurt the most wasn't being kicked out. It was feeling like you gave up on me. Like I wasn't worth fighting for." Her words hung in the air, raw and honest. Her mother broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Her father, however, remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. Maya waited, giving him time to process. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, strained with emotion. "I don't know how to explain it," he began, his words slow and deliberate. "At the time, I thought I was protecting our family, protecting you. But now I see how wrong I was. I failed you, Maya. As a father, as a man, I failed." His admission hit Maya like a wave, knocking the breath out of her. She hadn't expected an apology, let alone one so heartfelt. For years she'd imagined confronting him, demanding accountability for the pain he'd caused. But now that the moment was here, She realized she didn't want revenge or vindication. What she wanted, what she needed was closure. I didn't have an easy life after I left. Maya continued, her tone softening. I struggled every single day. There were times when I didn't think I'd make it, but I did. I worked hard, got my education, and raised Elijah on my own. He's amazing, Dad. Smart, kind, and full of dreams. He's my pride and joy. She smiled faintly, thinking of her son. But none of that erases the fact that I did it all without you. Without either of you. Her mother reached out, taking Maya's hand in hers. We're so sorry, sweetheart, she whispered, her grip trembling. If we could go back and change things, we would. You deserved better from us, so much better. Maya looked at her mother, then at her father, searching their faces for sincerity. She saw it, the regret, the sorrow, the love they had buried, beneath layers of shame and pride. It didn't excuse what they had done, but it humanized them. They weren't monsters. They were flawed people who had made a devastating mistake. And while forgiveness wouldn't come easily, Maya knew it was possible. There's someone else I want you to meet, she said after a long pause. Pulling out her phone, she scrolled through her photos until she found one of Elijah. Holding it up, she showed them the smiling face of a teenage boy with bright eyes and a confident grin. This is your grandson, she said, her voice filled with pride. His name is Elijah. Her parents stared at the photo, their expressions softening. Her mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. He looks just like you did at that age, she murmured, tears streaming down her face. Her father leaned closer, studying the image intently. He's beautiful, he said gruffly, his voice thick with emotion. Just like his mother. For the first time since walking through the door, Maya felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't about erasing the past, it was about acknowledging it, learning from it, and finding a way to move forward. She didn't owe her parents anything, but she owed it to herself to give them a chance. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about letting go of the anger that had weighed her down for so long. I forgive you, she said quietly, the words tasting strange on her tongue but bringing an unexpected sense of relief. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I want Elijah to know his grandparents, if that's what you want too. Her mother burst into fresh tears, nodding vigorously. Her father, however, remained silent, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Slowly, he stood and walked over to Maya, stopping just inches away. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, years of pain and misunderstanding passing between them in a single glance. Then, without a word, he pulled her into a hug. It was awkward and hesitant, but it was real. Maya felt the tension in his arms, the weight of his remorse, and the desperate need for connection. She hugged him back, allowing herself to feel the love that had always been there, buried beneath layers of hurt and pride. When they finally pulled apart, her father cleared his throat, his voice cracking as he spoke. Thank you, he said simply, for coming back, for forgiving us. Maya nodded, blinking back tears of her own. She knew this was only the beginning, a fragile step toward rebuilding what had been broken. But for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that healing was possible, not just for her but for all of them. In the weeks that followed Maya's visit to her childhood home, a cautious but steady transformation began to unfold. Her parents, humbled by their mistakes and desperate to make amends, reached out with tentative gestures of reconciliation. At first it was small things, a phone call from her mother asking how she and Elijah were doing, or a handwritten note from her father tucked into an envelope, apologizing once again for his role in their fractured relationship. These attempts felt awkward and uncertain, like two people trying to rebuild a bridge after years of neglect, but they carried a sincerity that Maya couldn't ignore. Elijah became the heart of this newfound connection. When Maya told him about meeting her parents, he reacted with curiosity rather than resentment. Do you think they want to meet me? He asked one evening, his voice tinged with both excitement and nervousness. Maya smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. I think they'd love that, she replied, but only if you're ready. Elijah nodded thoughtfully, chewing on the idea for a moment before responding. Maybe we could invite them over sometime, or maybe I could go see them. His openness surprised Maya. She had always tried to shield him from the pain of her past, careful not to burden him with stories of rejection and loss. Yet here he was, willing to extend a hand to people who hadn't been part of his life until now. It was a testament to his kind spirit, and perhaps to the lessons he'd learned from watching his mother navigate her own struggles. The first meeting between Elijah and his grandparents was arranged carefully, with Maya ensuring everyone felt comfortable. She chose a neutral location, a quiet park near her apartment, where they could sit together without the weight of old memories pressing down on them. On the day of the visit, Elijah dressed neatly, combing his hair twice before stepping outside. Maya noticed his nervous energy but kept her tone light and encouraging. "Just be yourself," she said as they walked toward the park. "They already love you. They just don't know it yet." When they arrived, her parents were waiting anxiously under a large oak tree, their faces lighting up at the sight of Maya and Elijah approaching. Her mother held a bouquet of flowers, which she immediately handed to Maya with trembling hands. "For you," she said softly, her eyes brimming with tears. Her father stood beside her, shifting uncomfortably but smiling warmly. "And for you," he added, holding out a wrapped gift for Elijah. Inside was a model airplane kit, something he remembered Maya loving as a child. The gesture was simple but meaningful, a nod to shared interests across generations. As they settled onto a picnic blanket, the conversation flowed haltingly at first. Small talk dominated, questions about school, hobbies, favorite foods, but soon Elijah's natural charm took over. He talked animatedly about his science projects, his dreams of becoming an engineer, and even cracked jokes that made her father laugh for the first time in years. Watching them interact, Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. This was what family was supposed to feel like: warm, supportive, full of laughter and connection. Over time, these visits became more frequent. Her parents invited Maya and Elijah to dinner at their house, where her mother cooked elaborate meals and her father proudly showed off old photo albums filled with pictures of Maya as a child. Each visit brought new revelations, stories Maya had forgotten, milestones she hadn't realized her parents remembered, and glimpses of the love they had always felt but failed to express properly. Slowly, trust began to rebuild, piece by fragile piece. For Maya, forgiveness wasn't a single act. It was a process. Some days old wounds flared up unexpectedly, triggered by a careless comment or a fleeting memory. But instead of retreating into anger, she chose to confront those feelings head-on, sharing them openly with her parents. They listened, sometimes struggling to respond but always willing to try. Their efforts weren't perfect, but they were genuine, and that mattered more than anything. Her siblings also played a crucial role in healing the rift. Now adults with families of their own, they welcomed Maya back with open arms, eager to reconnect and introduce her to their children. Family gatherings, once strained and uncomfortable, grew warmer and more joyful as cousins bonded over games and shared meals. For Elijah, having aunts, uncles, and cousins was a revelation. "It's like I've got a whole team cheering for me," he joked one day, grinning ear to ear. Through it all, Maya remained grounded in who she was and what she had overcome. She didn't let the renewed relationship diminish the strength she had built on her own. Instead, she used it as a foundation to create something stronger, a blended family that acknowledged its flaws but refused to let them define its future. Her parents, too, changed in profound ways. They became advocates for young mothers in their community, volunteering at local shelters and speaking openly about the importance of support and understanding. In many ways, they were learning from Maya, inspired by her resilience and determination. Years later, when Elijah graduated high school at the top of his class, Maya looked around the crowded auditorium with pride swelling in her chest. Her parents sat beside her, clapping enthusiastically as their grandson walked across the stage to receive his diploma. They were older now, their hair streaked with gray, but their smiles were radiant. In that moment, Maya realized how far they had all come, not just as individuals but as a family. Forgiveness hadn't erased the scars of the past, nor had it rewritten history. What it had done, however, was create space for something new, a second chance. Maya had shown her family, and herself, that love, no matter how broken, could find its way back if given the opportunity. And Elijah, standing tall and confident on the stage, embodied everything she had fought for: hope, resilience, and the belief that no matter how difficult the road, there is always a way forward. As the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Maya hugged Elijah tightly, whispering words of congratulations and love. Then, turning to her parents, she extended her hand, inviting them to join the celebration. Together, they stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, ready to face whatever lay ahead, not as strangers bound by blood, but as a family united by choice.